And welcome everyone to Sports Talk Line, where we talk sports 24/7, 365. And on today's episode for Battle of the Big East, we're going to be previewing the UConn versus DePaul women's basketball game. And on this episode, we have Kim Adams. Kim, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Tom. I'm excited to preview this one. It should be good. So thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Now, one of the things that immediately jumped out about this game was it's on network television on Fox. It was supposed to be part of a doubleheader, but COVID came in. But how important is it for women's basketball to be on network television?
Yeah, this is huge for the game. This is the first time a women's college game will be on Fox. So that's huge in and of itself. But just to have more exposure, more potential eyes on the game, I think is huge for the growth of it. I think we saw that with the WNBA this past summer. There were a ton more games on the main networks, ABC, ESPN, and you just saw the league kind of take off in terms of even just social media followings for the players, for the teams. So to have this showdown on a network is huge. I've always said I think there should be way more women's hoops on kind of the main networks. We're seeing a ton on, Big Ten Network, ACC Network, SEC Network, which is awesome. But I want to see more games on ESPN, ESPN2, FS1, Fox, wherever. So I think this is a great opportunity to grow the game and to just get more eyes on the game who may really only watch men's basketball or may watch football and tune in and say, wow, this is pretty competitive stuff. I think we saw a great game the other night between UConn and Tennessee. And I think everyone just wish we could see more of that on a more regular basis. So this is definitely a great step in the right direction for women's hoops.
Now, since we're talking about UConn basketball, I do believe the casual sports fan recognizes how great the women's program is, including Michael Jordan, because he has that famous line in that documentary talking about UConn women's basketball. Now, how do you think, though, the other coaches in the Big East reacted when the big rabid Wolverine, the big bull, came back into the Big East?
Yeah, it's interesting just kind of going back to last season when it was announced that they would be returning and just getting to talk to a bunch of the coaches about it. I think everybody kind of a two-stream process. One, it's obviously great for the league to bring back a perennial power who's going to be at the top of the rankings, who's going to contend for Final Fours and national championships year after year. So it obviously elevates the profile of the league. But on the other side, now, hey, we got to get a lot better, these other 10 teams. And I think they're really up for that challenge. I think recruiting is going to raise a lot. I think you're going to see more of the top prospects starting to come to the Big East. I think the league as a whole, the coaches are like, this is awesome for us. I think potentially it could help them get more teams into the NCAA tournament, just have more depth in the league. But I think everyone realizes, okay, if we're gonna challenge them for Big East titles, we got to get better. We have to get better recruits. So it's great, and it's a challenge all at once.
Okay. Now, also too, we mentioned about UConn women's basketball. They have star power. They always have, from Rebecca Lobo, Diana Taurasi. I just love Gino Auriemma's quote about her, where it's like, we had Diana and they didn't. And then also to Breanna Stewart, and more in the last few years. Who do you think now on the current UConn women's roster will be able to fill in and become that superstar that pretty much leads women's basketball during her time in college?
I think it's absolutely going to be Paige Bueckers. For any who may have not known her name yet, you will soon. She's just a freshman for the Huskies, was the top recruit in her class out of Minnesota. And she is already making a huge impact at UConn. I'm looking at some of their stats here. She's leading them in scoring, leading them in assists, leading them in steals, shooting over 50% from the floor. And I think and I think Gino would agree with this, and hearing some of his quotes on her, at times she's a little bit too unselfish. She's a natural point guard. She's got height, she's got speed, and she loves to kind of add some spice to the game, add some flavor to her passes. But at times you've seen Gino talking to her like, we need you to score more. So I think we're just starting to kind of see that from her. And it was so apparent in that huge win over Tennessee the other night. I think that was like the moment, like, okay, Paige has arrived and she's going to be a big time deal here. For anyone who didn't see that shot, I would encourage you to go back, but she hit the dagger, a 3-pointer as the shot clock was expiring, and she had really badly twisted her ankle. Like, she went out of the game, got taped up. We didn't even know if she was going to come back in. And then she really came back in and was hobbling, could barely run. And then she knocked down this dagger of a 3. And you could just see it in her eyes in that moment, like see her fire, see the competitiveness. And I think that's when it was kind of solidified, like, okay, Paige Bueckers is the real deal.
Now, one thing about Paige's shot was I looked at the box score after the game. I believe she had not hit a 3 that whole game. She was 3 of 6, I believe 3 of 14, 3 of 16, I believe, around that range. So here you have a freshman coming in who has shot poorly, but you want to know what they always want in an athlete is that clutch game. And it looked like she showed it on national television. Ryan Ruocco had a call. It seemed like the stars aligned and a lot of people were watching that moment on ESPN, which I think is a great thing for the women's game moving forward. And speaking about moving forward, hopefully everyone here, if they haven't done so already, has clicked that like and subscribe button on YouTube so they can follow Sports Talk Line. But you know what, Kim, it takes 2 to tango. And we have a DePaul program that's going up against UConn. Now, they already met this season. UConn won 75-52. A loss like that to the UConn women's team is not that devastating, but do you think DePaul has improved since that game in late December?
I think they have. I had the chance to talk with Coach Bruno last week. I had one of their games. I think really the main growth point for them since that game is shot recognition. They didn't shoot well in that game. None of their top 4 scorers got into double digits. So that's going to have to change this weekend. So I think Coach Bruno got them to recognize a lot over the last few weeks. What's a good shot and what's a situation where I can make one more pass, or I can attack the paint and make a pass and go from a good shot to a great shot. I also think UConn's size was a big factor in that game. Olivia Nelson-Adota, their center, is about 6'4", 6'5", and she's been a problem for any team in the Big East. The Big East just traditionally doesn't have big, huge back to the basket post players, and I think that's something that teams are going to have to adapt to now with UConn in the league. But DePaul does have a little bit more size in this matchup. There's a player, Kiara Dahlman. You wouldn't pick her out of the stat sheet because she's just coming back from an injury, hasn't seen too much action, but she's 6'2". So I think she has a potential to help with rebounding, which was a concern for them, and help with defending Olivia Nelson-Adota. So really those 2 areas, just taking better shots, defending the paint, rebounding, and then just taking care of the ball. So there's definitely some areas that were pretty apparent where DePaul would have to be better, but I think Coach Bruno absolutely kind of gathered his team, watched film, and they've had 4 convincing wins since that loss. So I think they'll be ready to go.
So you kind of went down some of the players already for DePaul. Out of those, who do you think will step up and be the true leader for DePaul now? Do they have someone as a closer, or do you think it'll be more like play by committee? But who do you think would be the alpha for DePaul?
It turned kind of just for overall leadership. I think they turned to Bueckers, who is a senior who has really just stayed the course at DePaul in this age of transfers and, freshman, I didn't start, I only played a couple minutes, I'm going to go to the next destination. Bueckers is somebody who has become their true leader, and she's become a big-time scorer for them as well. She's their 3rd leading scorer this season. So she's kind of the calming presence that I see from them. Coach Bruno actually called her the junkyard dog, just somebody who's just always diving on the floor or making the right play. So she's kind of their leader. In terms of players who are going to need to have a big game, I'm looking for a big game out of Lexi Held. Lexi Held is a junior wing. Really, her and Sonia Morris kind of came in together, both junior guards. Lexi Held is a really talented shooter, and I don't think we've seen that breakout game from her yet this season. She erupted last year in the Big East championship game with 31 points to win the trophy for DePaul. So I think we're still waiting to see that big offensive explosion game from her, Lexi Held. And then I'd like to see a big game from their center, Jory Allen, who is in her first year after transferring from Indiana. So I think they're going to need her to get 10, 12 points, 8 to 10 rebounds to kind of offset Olivia Nelson-Adota in the paint. So Diva Kelja as kind of just the floor general leader, keeping everyone together. And then I think they're going to need big games out of Lexi Held and Jory Allen.
Okay, now you kind of mentioned some other players, but do you think out of all the players you mentioned, or maybe a player you haven't mentioned, DePaul will be the underdog? Who would DePaul need to step up to get the win against the UConn Huskies?
I'll go with Lexi Held. I think she is capable of putting up 30 on a given night, and I think she can get that fire in her eyes. I think in the first meeting she got a little frustrated, as most of their starters did. They didn't shoot well. They weren't getting great shots. I think if Lexi Held hits a couple big shots early, she can really get rolling, and she can really help just elevate the energy and confidence of her team.
Okay, now yesterday, Kim, I was watching an ESPN Classic game. It was Duke versus North Carolina. It was a classic 1-2 matchup from, I believe, 1998, where you had Vince Carter and Antoine Jameson on North Carolina, Shane Battier, you had Elton Brand, who was actually hurt, and Steve Wojciechowski. Right, so there you have a 1-2 battle within the conference. Which program in the Big East do you think can rise up and be the most consistent year in, year out challenge to UConn? Because UConn's number one now. 2020, 2021 is a crazy year. UConn's on top of women's Big East basketball. Who do you see? Which program do you see as the biggest threat to consistently challenge UConn for the throne in the Big East?
Well, when you hear the word consistency, DePaul immediately comes to mind, just because they have a program built on consistency. I think it's now 17 or 18 straight years that they've been to the NCAA tournament, and there's only 5 other teams in the country who have done that. I don't know if I know that off the top of my head, but we're talking Tennessee, Stanford, UConn. So they're like, DePaul is up there when it comes to great women's basketball programs. I may kind of bend the rules on your question here and just throw out a couple other names. The last 3-4 years in the Big East, it's been DePaul and Marquette. So I think it would be a disservice to not name Marquette in this conversation. They're having another great season under second-year head coach Megan Duffy, who really just did amazing things in her first year last year. And then I do have to name one more team who I've been really impressed with lately. And unfortunately, they just went back into a COVID contact tracing situation, but that's Seton Hall. Seton Hall, I think, had won 5 in a row before this pause. I think this is now their 3rd pause, which just, what a crazy season. But they have a grad transfer right now in Andra Espinoza Hunter, who's the last 2 weeks Big East Player of the Week. And I think she's taken them from maybe a 4-5 team in the Big East to a 2-3 team in the Big East. And even without her, they literally just got her a month ago. Seton Hall played UConn the toughest of anyone I've seen in the Big East this season. And Tony Vizella has done a great job bringing in players who just have that toughness and that grit. And I think that's what you need when you go against UConn. I think a lot of teams, the biggest issue when you go up against UConn is just lacking confidence and like going out before the ball is even tipped and feeling like you're down 15-0. When you play UConn, like, you can't be intimidated by the banners and the rafters, the name on the jersey. Like, you have to be like, okay, I'm stepping on the court and going to go toe-to-toe with this team. And I think those 3 teams that I just mentioned, DePaul, Marquette, and Seton Hall, all have that mentality. So I think it might take a little bit of time, like a couple more recruiting classes, maybe get some good transfers to come in. Like as of now, UConn is still undoubtedly number one, but I know there's going to be a couple teams gunning for them at the Big East tournament this March, or who knows when it could end up being this year with how crazy everything is.
Hopefully it happens. But I think you bring up Espinoza Hunter, and I think the most interesting thing about her story, she originally played at UConn. But
right.
She transferred out because usually there's an agreement where you can't recruit players within the conference if they transfer. So she gets an opportunity to go back against Gino Auriemma, and I wonder if she's going to have an extra chip on her shoulder that game. That's going to be something I think to watch out for. But
yeah, that'll be interesting for sure.
Before we leave, can you tell our viewers where they can follow you on Twitter and social media?
Yes. So on Twitter, I'm trying to get my name to an easier one, but Twitter is making it difficult. My Twitter handle is currently at Kim. See, I don't know. It's so confusing. Kim Adams _1. I think that it's like, I have such a common first and last name. I have to get creative. If you search Kim Adams, it'll probably show up, but it's like Kim _Adams1, something like that. On Instagram, it's a little simpler. It's just Kim Adams __ Kim Adams. I'm trying to get everything unified, but Twitter is being weird about me changing my name. I don't really know why. But yeah, hopefully if you just search Kim Adams, you'll see me there with my microphone or something like that.
Don't worry. My Twitter handle is defense_com, at DFENDS_com. And of course I can't change it, but I appreciate Kim, you coming on, and I appreciate those that have watched us. And for those of you at home, listen like you play with intensity.